Everybody, Jimmy Smith back. First off, I got over 30,000 subscribers to my YouTube channel. I want to thank every single one of you. You're awesome. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm trying to keep up with content. One of the issues is when I do news content, stuff that's happening, it does really well, but I can't control the news cycle. So what I want to discuss right now, first off, thank you to everybody. Obviously, this betting scandal right now hitting the UFC. I want to give my insight into that one, and obviously, it's spilling over to where there's an investigation of Jason Herzog, a friend of mine. I'll get into that in a minute. So, first off, I've been in MMA for over a quarter century now, since the late 90s, and I have never come across, in my own personal experience, an outright fix, right? What I mean by that is no one's ever come to me and go, oh, so-and-so took a dive, or so-and-so's about to take a dive. I've never had an outright, hey, this person did or is going to take a dive. Even though I've been around the industry, I've been as a coach, I've been all this stuff, I've seen some bad performances, but I'll get into why MMA is particularly vulnerable to this in a minute. But I've never been around an outright fix. In big fights, the famous fix from my era was Nobuhiko Takada, Mark Coleman. It's an obvious work. Everybody knows it. It was an obvious fix. Japanese MMA always had a very thin line between, works, meaning, pro wrestling matches, and MMA. So a lot of those early matches in Pride, not Shuto, but I'd say Pride, a few organizations kind of like, you didn't know if it was pro wrestling or MMA. And so that was pretty normal in Japan at that time, late 90s. The U.S., that line is very, very firm, and crossing it is illegal. It's a federal crime because you're using interstate communication networks to bet. That makes it a federal crime. So everybody knows this Isaac Dulgarian controversy. There are two sides to this that you have to understand. Number one is he was a 2-1 favorite, had a crap fight, was submitted in round number one, which makes the return betting on a first round finish to a 2-1 dog, to a 2-1 favorite. You can get 4-1, 5-1, depending on your book, right? If someone's a 2-1 favorite, finish in the first round, multiply that, 4 to 5-1. I read an article that says the action on this fight, a prelim with no particular stakes, was $16 million. Now, I don't know what the average is and how high that is. It was significant. 16 million on an undercard fight no one cares about sounds to me like an ungodly amount. That drew red flags. Obviously, this math is being monitored by everyone involved. Every gambling website app is motivated to see a red flag and let everyone know. The UFC was informed beforehand that there is crazy action on this fight. Something's up, right? That all this money was coming in. The line was shifting because so much was going in on the underdog, especially in first round finish, which is weird. The UFC allowed the fight to go on. Now, my personal thought on this, I haven't spoken to anybody in the UFC. I'm not connected to them in any way. This is my own supposition. Hey, there's a lot of movement on this fight. Okay, we don't know if something's going to happen. Let's let the fight happen. If something looks suspicious, we'll do an investigation. To me, it's not necessarily a red flag that the UFC didn't do anything. The idea that anyone in the UFC would be in on this is absurd. I'll get into more details later, but to give up a solid career for a one-time, 2-1 favorite losing is an absurd trade. You wouldn't do that. Also, once they know, hey, FBI is looking at this, all the money's going to be refunded if it goes off in a first round finish. It's going to be a wash, right? Everybody's going to get their money back. They're not going to pay out on this. So someone involved in it who said, oh, let's let it keep going, they know they're not going to make their money. It's at that point, once the FBI's involved, you're done. In fact, you'd pull the plug if you were involved and you go, oh, yeah, let's cancel that fight. Right? So I don't see it as suspicious that the UFC let it go on because they have nothing, hey, we'll let it go on. If it ends up being suspicious, you guys take care of it. We'll do an internal investigation, but the FBI is involved. That's on you guys. And Dana White has said that publicly before. Dude, this is a federal crime, right? So we'll let them take care of it. Why are UFC fighters vulnerable to this kind of corruption? look at all the stick and ball sports, or combat sports, period, are vulnerable to this kind of thing. But I think MMA particularly, it's a career in which you only have a few years. It doesn't pay a ton until you get to the elite level, and even then, you could make enough money throwing a fight that it could be worth it. Not a lot of people make it to the top. And think about the pitch to someone like a Dulgarian, right? And this is on the corruption side, not the injury side, which I'll get into in a second. The idea that you could go to a fighter like Dulgarian and go, oh, also another factor, losses don't kill you. It's not the end of your career. So if you went to a fighter like Dulgarian and your pitch might be, look, how good are you? Are you going to beat the champion in your division and be number one at some point? Right? Pulp Fiction. Came close, but you didn't get there, and if you would have gotten there by now. I'm not saying Dulgarian's old, but this idea that, are you really going to go far enough to make the kind of money I can give you right now for throwing a fight? You're making, what? I don't know what his purse would have been, 15 and 15, 30 grand, 50 grand. We can make 5 or 6 times that in one shot. That's your retirement fund right there. And, as I just said, look, you lose this fight, big deal, you get choked out in the first round. Your career can continue. If you're going to get there, you can get there. But in this one instance, you can make 5 or 6 times what you'd make in one fight for doing it our way. Then you can go on and rehabilitate yourself and your career. Other sports just don't work that way. I mean, the amount of money it would take to bribe an NFL player who could have an influence on a game, meaning the quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver that gets a bunch, catches a bunch of balls per game. The amount it would take to get them to lose a significant game would make it counterproductive. You have to pay them so much, it wouldn't make your money back. And why am I going to ruin my career for this one-time payoff? It makes no sense. In fighting, it does, because an undercard fight and a main card fight, 2-to-1 odds is 2-to-1 odds. So you can find that fighter who doesn't have much of a career, or isn't going to have much of a career, or isn't going to make a top, or some journeyman that can afford a loss who might be a big favorite in a fight, and go, look, all right, one more loss. What difference does it make? But you can make a lot of money off this. So you see why the pitch to corrupt a fighter is just, it has more impact in MMA than it has in other sports. Boxing, similar thing, where you get an undercard guy. The guys at the top make too much money. Canelo Alvarez would never throw a fight. He makes so much money that you'd have to pay him an ungodly amount of money. He'll never make your money back, right? So fighters, even main card guys in the UFC, make the kind of money that a one-time payoff can be significant, right? A boxer who has a bright future, it'd be really tough to go, hey, lose this one fight. And once again, fighting in a loss in boxing is more detrimental to your career than it is in MMA. God, you want to derail your up-and-coming career for a one-time payoff? It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. In MMA, it isn't tough at all. The pay structure just allows for this conversation to have a lot more impact on a mixed martial artist, even in the UFC. So there's that. Also, the idea that MMA, unlike other sports, tends to romanticize and reward fighters for fighting compromised. Right? Every time there's a major fight, you hear like, oh, I had broken ribs, and I had this, and I had that, and blah, blah, blah. And you just go, all right, what are you thinking? This idea that a stick and ball sport, a team sport, they are motivated to not let an injured player onto the field. Right? A wide receiver that can't run effectively is no good. You sit him on the bench, okay? Doesn't make sense to put him out there. A mixed martial arts, and this I have seen a million times. Everybody watching this video has seen it a million times, where some fighter gets out there and they are clearly, obviously compromised. They lied their asses off on that little sheet that says whether or not you're injured. And they lied. That's where the line gets so much blurrier. Not someone intentionally throwing a fight, which is what they're investigating right now, but this idea, remember with the James Krause fight, it was the guy had a bad knee. Krause was maybe getting loose-lipped with that information or passing that information on to other people. He has not been charged with a crime that I'm aware of. or certainly not convicted of one. This idea that happens all the time. How is TJ Dillashaw getting out there with a shoulder that dislocated, he said, 20 times in camp? How is that not corrupt? How is that not influencing the outcome of the fight? He was totally incapable of winning the title with his shoulder popping out over and over. And if I know that, and I bet on that, am I committing a crime? Is that inside information? I'm not his coach, right? I'm not his teammate. Somebody told me that his shoulder was bad. So I said, okay, I put some money on it. Am I committing a crime? That's when it gets hazy. And that's another reason why MMA is more vulnerable than other sports. Because people fight compromised all the time. All the time. I've seen it a million times. When Bellator had their Legends fight thing, right, that I was there for, where guys like Ken Shamrock are fighting, Tito Ortiz and blah, 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 and these guys who were just past it. They want one payday, and that's kind of it. Their heart's not in it. And to say, I don't think Ken Shamrock can go more than a couple minutes. I'm betting on Kimbo Slice, who can't go more than a few minutes himself. Am I an idiot for doing that? Am I corrupt? Am I cheating? Not really. I heard it was Josh Koscheck, who was signed by Bellator. I heard from, I'm not joking, a dozen people like, dude, his neck is garbage. He will fight one time, maybe. They were trying to set up, obviously, a fight with him and Semtex Daly, a rematch there. He fought once, got housed, never came back again, officially retired. I knew that for weeks. Like, I had heard from multiple training partners. Like, dude, his neck and his back are really messed up. He just is too compromised to really put an effort in there. And he got killed and never fought in Bellator again. Now, I did not bet. I'm not a gambling guy. But taking advantage of that kind of information, it's impossible not to. And once again, MMA is uniquely vulnerable. Fighters don't make a ton of money. It's a very short-term career, if you want to call it that. A loss doesn't kill you, so you could move past one. And they're always fighting compromise. They're always fighting hurt. And things like that get around. I think that happens much more than the outright fix. A fighter outright taking a dive, I think, is very, very rare comparatively, you know. But fighters fighting, hey, this guy can barely walk, he can barely get to the frickin' octagon, that happens constantly. And I think that's a much bigger issue. The other thing to think about is the idea that it's the math gave this one away. I have seen, and I saw the fight, worse performances than Dulgarian. I've seen guys take a bad shot, you know, somebody takes your back, choke. I've seen guys dive right into a damn guillotine. The first few seconds, I've seen guys walk into a left hook and go just to get clipped, and that's it. Happens all the time. So I've seen worse performances as far as the eye test goes. Well, that looked fishy. Well, I've seen pretty terrible performances in the octagon. And remember, this is not for a title. This is not an elite level fighter. It's the math. The $16 million bet on this, once again, meaningless prelim fight. Red flags everywhere. So he told too many people. Or he told the wrong kinds of people, and it got out all over the place. If that hadn't happened, this fight, as far as the eye test goes, I'm sorry, an undercard bum who is a 2-1 favorite getting crushed in the first round happens. So I don't think any of us would have gone, you might have gone, oh man, he looks like crap. But once again, fighters fighting compromise so much, you go in there, you take a bad shot, you get your back taken, and you go, yeah, I had a shoulder injury, what do you want? It's not illegal. You technically committed perjury on the form, but no one ever prosecutes for that. So the eye test, I think, most fixes that happen, they might look fishy, but I've seen a lot of fishy fights that weren't fixes. It's the math of too many people finding out what's going on. The odds change dramatically, and that's it. Can you prove it in a court of law? That's going to be the problem. Unless Dulgarian somehow really mobbed up and they have some kind of recording of him telling somebody, talking on a wire or something like that, how can you prove any of that? It's very, very difficult. And until you can prove it, yeah, you don't get your money on the bet. It's a wash. You get your money back. But the idea that if no one goes to jail, there's no reason to not try this again with some other fighter and just not tell as many people. So kind of figuring out, okay, what are the red flags and how do we avoid them? So fighters are vulnerable, and if no one ever gets caught to the point of doing real time, okay, you're out of the UFC. All right, people get cut all the time from the UFC. So it's a very difficult thing to fix from the fighter side. Now, Jason Herzog is another thing that's happening right now. And I've read a few articles about it. One's on MMAnews.com. And the headline is, over 100 UFC fights flagged by the FBI. Potential audit sought for fights refereed by Jason Herzog. Full disclosure, Jason's a friend of mine. Love him to death. Obviously worked a lot with him in Bellator and I really like the guy. My thoughts on this, all the way around, is, number one, personally, and I like Jason if evidence comes out that shows that he did something inappropriate or something corrupt. I will come on and talk about it like a rational adult, even though he's a friend of mine. So I don't let my friendship with Jason, the fact that I really like him, blind me from the evidence that comes out. I know maybe I'm weird. But first thing I thought is, Jason's not a street guy. And I know people in this industry, and to me that's not an insult, that are street guys, that, you know, came up from the hood and became coaches, became fighters, became referees, worked for the athletic commission, who have shady pasts, who, you know, who knows, might get involved in something where they get in debt to the wrong person and need a way out. Jason's not a street guy. He's from San Diego. He was in a doctoral program the last time I spoke to him, and maybe have gotten through it now. Very well educated. He wasn't one of those guys running around with a crowd where I went, oh, you know, get in trouble at some point. He's not one of those guys. Now, doesn't mean that he didn't get in trouble somehow, but that was the first thing that occurred to me, is Jason's not a street guy. The other part of it, and please follow my logic here, and find a hole in it, please. I'd love to hear it in the comment section. The problem with bribing a referee or having a corrupt referee is, unlike MMA, that's a career you can have for years and years and years. Once you get in, and for people who don't know, it's kind of an old boy system. Once the athletic commissions like you and you're on the rotation, California, Nevada, obviously New Jersey, the big commission states, New York, you're set, right? You can referee fights until you're in your frickin' 60s or 70s, right? I remember boxing referees, Joe Cortez was doing it for years and years and years. It's a long-term career. So someone comes to you and says, hey, we're going to offer you money to fix fights. You got to weigh a potential 30-year career, unlike fighting, that's a few years at best. You got to weigh a whole career that I can have for the rest of my life and against whatever I'm making on this particular deal that is corrupt. Also, if you get caught, you have signed many, many documents that say you are going to prison if you do this, in a way a fighter did not. Meaning, a fighter can go to jail for fixing a fight, for sure. But a referee is doomed. They will go after you with everything they got. So the idea that you have to weigh what you would have made in a whole career versus this payoff, whatever it is. So it has to be a significant payoff. It has to be a lot of money to get somebody to give up a potentially long career. So how much power does a referee have in a fight? In certain fights, they have a lot. In certain fights, they have none. So you got to pay them a lot of money up front. Here is your money up front. A lot of the time, a referee, let's take, for example, Ankalaev versus Pereira. Let's say you bought that referee and said, I want Ankalaev to win. Nothing a referee could have done. He got housed in a minute, right? A guy got hit with a left hook and drops face down. We don't want to wake him up again, right? You want to call that a foul? I can't, right? Fouls in MMA aren't particularly ticky-tack. What I mean by that is you either get poked in the eye, get kicked in the groin, you headbutt somebody, you bite them, or you don't. I can't. It's not an hour-long football game, basketball game, whatever the heck it is, where I can favor a team and swing things over the course of a game. A lot of guys get rocked, get hit, and they're out, and it's over. And, hey, we bought the referee. Well, what do you want me to do? I can't step in there and reverse the call and wake the guy up, right? So it requires a huge investment, and the referee can only do so much in most fights. In most fights, Sure, the referee can make some ticky-tack calls, all right, but does that swing the fight? Not necessarily, right? Certain fights it was, certain fights it wouldn't. Are you going to pay that money up front, hoping that it's the kind of fight where one or two things can make the difference? And in a lot of fights in MMA, it doesn't, right? So a corrupt referee isn't that useful. For people who don't follow sports and statistical analysis and all this stuff, corrupt referees, which we've seen in basketball and other sports, especially basketball, it's not a matter of swinging the winner. It's a corrupt referee can shave a few points off a game. So if the Dallas Mavericks are favored by 15 points over the Houston Rockets, a referee favoring the Houston Rockets can make that gap 7, 6, 8 points, right? Which obviously you don't cover the spread, so their team wins. So it's much more, as I said, ticky-tack, where a referee in the NFL that's corrupt can maybe keep that field goal from happening that allows this, and that, and can keep the spread. MMA doesn't work that way. Fighters get crushed sometimes, not all the time, right? So also, if you didn't buy the judge, having a referee do favor a particular fighter doesn't necessarily sway the judges. That's not going to necessarily help you. So when I was thinking about this whatever investigation they're doing against Jason Herzog, I remember when Herb Dean, for a long time, even still to this day, was making a lot of calls I did not agree with. And I was like, man, what is going on with Herb Dean? He just wasn't, How many of those were swung one way or the other? That's much harder to say, right? I remember one of them was Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, and Luke Rockhold was beating the piss out of Chris Weidman at the end of, was it round 2? I don't remember. But he's just beating the crap out of him, and Herb Dean's not stopping the fight, let it go. Well, Luke Rockhold ended up winning anyway. The idea that wasn't stopped at that point I didn't agree with it, but it didn't help, right? Didn't swing the fight around. It just didn't. So a corrupt referee, while a much more serious thing because they're supposed to have integrity in a way a fighter isn't, well, a fighter's supposed to have some integrity, but a referee, a judge, they're, it's a much bigger deal as far as integrity goes. But how much of effect can it have, right? If you buy a judge, okay, maybe it doesn't get to the frickin' decision. There's always that possibility that you paid a judge a bunch of money to influence a fight, and he's like, well, he got knocked out in round 2. What do you want from me? So, fighters themselves much more vulnerable than referees, judges who may or may not be able to swing a fight. The only thing that makes sense when it comes to a judge or a referee, this is where the statistical analysis comes in, and someone probably in the comment section explained. I took statistical analysis in college, but it's been a while. Basically, if you had a corrupt referee and went, I want you to favor the underdog every time you referee for X amount of time, for 6 months, I want you to favor the underdog. Betting over that 6 months, you might make your money back. If you're always putting money on the underdog when your referee is refereeing, over 6 months, they can influence it enough that the odds swing in your favor to the point where you'll make your money back. But doing it in one fight, the odds that the referee is able to swing the fight your way in that amount of time, once again, Ankalaev versus Pereira, if you had bought the referee, it didn't make any difference. Dude got clipped, dropped, that's it, it's over. What do you want your money back? I can't make the guy not get cracked. But over a long term, if someone's bought for years and years and years, but once again, fans will notice more and more and more that you are always favoring the underdog. So over the long term is the only way you would make any money. And I would love to see, if someone's a better mathematician than I am, a statistical analysis of whether or not that might work. You'd have to account for some variables there. But the idea that over the long term is the only way it would work, but also over the long term, you're more likely to get caught. If someone's if a referee makes a bad call in a big fight, that happens. That happens, okay? It's the way it goes. If someone's constantly favoring fighters from a particular camp, from a particular team, once again, favoring the underdog, all this stuff, it would stand out more. So that's the situation we're in, where fighters themselves are particularly vulnerable to this type of corruption. And will they get caught? Well, if the consequences, and let me know what you think again in the comment section. Dulgarian getting booted from the UFC sucks, but until somebody does like a real stretch and there's a real investigation and someone does some serious time, the motivation to not try it again, to me, isn't very high. Especially, it wasn't Dulgarian who was putting the money down. Some heavy was putting the money down. Unless he goes down for some serious federal charges, the motivation to not find another fighter who will do the same thing is too easy. Just don't tell enough people to raise the red flags and you'll make money. Let me know what you think, what the consequences should be. Obviously, next big news, I'll talk about it here.